The story begins as an apparently legally compromised man lights his cigarette whilst getting off the car on a hauntingly dark, shady bridge over a body of water in which a small boat remains afloat and only paces up as the man from over the bridge repetitively switches the headlights of the car to signal his accomplice on the boat. David gets off the boat and shakily hands over a package to the man before he demands that his dues be cleared since he has made up his mind to quit the business. This infuriates the man, who silently frowns to demonstrate his disapproval and slams the car door shut as he refuses to pay David, who is left distressed down to begging as the car starts to make its way just when David steals out the package through the window and bolts away. The car dashes behind to follow him, and then the man inside jumps out to run at a gallop to catch David, only to enter a brawl which ends up in David accidentally killing the man in an attempt to avert the muzzle of the gun. With the siren blaring, the police arrive at the scene. David, anxious and perplexed, attempts to flee by taking to his heels while a dozen police officers follow him through the dark forest and the shady alleyways of Pondalem. As David momentarily escapes the police, gasping for air, he halts near the under-construction site of the Pondalem police station, where he witnesses Vijay Salgaonkar secretly and feebly walking out after having filled in a hole in the ground. Little does he know what Vijay was actually up to. David runs and bangs recklessly on his house door, ordering Mary, his wife, to leave with him. However, he succumbs to surrendering to the police as they girdle around his residence to arrest him on October 4, 2014. The story takes a 7-year leap and illuminates how life changed for the Salgaonkar family. As the film ends, the cinema hall lightens up again, and Vijay Salgaonkar, the protagonist, upon being asked for his opinion, dissects to scrutinize the storyline of the movie to justify reducing the number of screens allotted to the film in his cinema. By the evening, he joins the dinner table with his family, where the room is marked with indistinct, joyous chatter as they discuss the movie Vijay ought to produce in the forthcoming years. The following morning, Vijay wakes up to the sound of an altercation. As he walks out, he witnesses a terrified Nandini peeping outside the kitchen window into the foreyard of their drunken neighbor who unabashedly assaults his wife. The cries of the howling woman being beaten up by her husband petrify Nandini so much so that she convinces Vijay to intervene. Vijay reluctantly intervenes only to see the drunken, abusive husband hurl abuses at him and mock him for his involvement in the 7-year-old murder case of Samir Deshmukh. Vijay, being visibly infuriated by the recollection, advises Jenny to file a police complaint against her domestically violent husband to mark the end of her ordeal. Engaged in the routine chores at his cinema office, the same morning, Vijay, to his surprise, is informed about a visitor who had come walking down the alleys of his past to rekindle the flames of his trauma for yet another time. Mahesh Deshmukh. Vijay gathers up the courage to make those few steps towards Mahesh, who anxiously awaits him in the lobby. In the tense encounter that follows, the seemingly desolated Mahesh pleads with Vijay to disclose where he buried Sam's dead body. He elucidates how he and Meera had traveled all the way from London to India to carry out the last rites of Samir since his soul has been deprived of peace ever since his demise. He explains that the rituals would require them to have his funeral pyres, which they would never be able to obtain until Vijay chooses to disclose what he has been hiding for 7 long years. Helplessness peeps through Vijay's eyes as he begins to apologize for his unshaken refusal to release any of his burdens to Mahesh. And alas, a disconsolate Mahesh leaves the office. In the dining area of one of the most renowned scriptwriters, Vijay sits to explain how he believes his story ends in a humdrum flat climax which he is keen to change. As he presses to discuss a few ideas that he would want the writer to ponder over, they enter a discussion. Vijay parks his car near the cemetery and walks along the chronically ill cemetery keeper, and he inquires him about his health, the well-being of his family, and the recent wedding of his daughter. He follows the conversation by apologizing for not being able to attend the wedding and hands over an envelope as a souvenir. As tears well up in the eyes of the man, he expresses sheer gratitude towards Vijay's financial assistance over the years and unconditional support through his thick and thins, which Vijay tends to brush off as he leaves after reassuring him. On the other front, David, having spent a 7-year-long sentence in prison, walks out of the premises of Central Jail, once again as a free man. In a shabby residence, he sits across his frustrated and irked wife Mary, who feeds him half-heartedly. The seemingly disturbed family makes it through the torturing silence when David asks his son if he goes to school, upon which he responds by turning his head sideways. Mary goes on to rant about the financial distress she dealt with alone for all these years David had been absent. A guilt-ridden David, seeing his wife break down because of his shortcomings, pledges to make things better for them now that he has come. On the occasion of Sam's birthday, like every year, Meera arranges for a sermon at her residence. However, heartbroken by the end her son had to meet, she willingly isolates herself on the day, only to return back to the sermon to announce that her vengeance has flared up once again against those who wronged her son, and warns against her wrath that would soon boil forth to result in massive devastation. By the roadside cafe after a few drinks, Vijay and his friend engage in the usual chat, where his friend, worried about the slow progress of the film-making procedure, inquires if it worries Vijay that the script might get leaked by the time the movie goes on the floor. In an attempt to placate him, Vijay opens up about his scheme. He explains how he has gotten a book to be written based on his script with only a few copies published to eliminate running the risk of script theft. That same night, as Nandini lounges with Jenny, they entertain a conversation about the marriage proposal for Anju. Jenny informs Nandini about the refusal, which visibly perplexes her. Jenny goes on to talk about how the rumor has it that the night of the murder, Vijay had discovered Sam and Anju together, engaged in an obscene encounter, which compelled him to kill the innocent boy. This distortion of the truth shatters Nandini, who panics and, as a consequence, to her dismay, almost discloses the true account of the night to Jenny, however, stops just in time without letting her know any substantial details. The following night, as the clock ticks in Anju's room while the entire Salgayakar clan sleeps in serenity, Anju wakes up to quench her thirst. As she makes her way through the dark, vacant lounge all the way to the kitchen, she overhears a faint sound, one that she was familiar with due her involvement in the entire murder fiasco. The sound of digging into the earth. Anju musters up all her courage to peep out of the window, just to be met by a gaze piercing right through the distance and straight into her eyes, reeking of vengeance. A gaze that of Mira Desmuk, surrounded by raincoat-clad men drenched in rainwater, tirelessly and interminably digging to exhume the corpse. The sight gets to her nerves, and Anju hysterically bolts towards Vijay's bedroom and recklessly bangs on the door, panicking and howling uncontrollably. The nightmare ends here, however, only after culminating into an epileptic shock. The nightmare was a traumatic response to Anju's encounter with the police the preceding morning, who had come to inquire about the domestic quarrels of their neighbors, however, had provoked a stress response in Anju, who was baffled after having seen the police at their doorsteps once again after 7 long years. As David takes the last sip of his cup of piping hot tea at the Martin's corner, he makes his way till the counter to halt by Martin's side. He draws the wallet from his pocket just when an intrigued Martin questions him about the completion of his prison sentence. David takes to the opportunity and requests Martin to help him seek employment prospects in the locality. Martin refers him to Vijay, who had just walked in the meantime. The encounter marks as the first one between David and Vijay in the span of the past 7 years, as Inspector Sawant enjoys dinner in the company of his family. A phone call from the IG Goa orders him to join the team at his office. On his way, he stops to collect Gaitan for him to be taken along on the orders of the IG. After a 7 years-long suspension, Gaitan reclaims his sinister smile and reassumes power as soon as he seats at the police jeep once again. At the IG office, Sawant and Gaitan are met by the Inspector General of Goa along with Mira Desmuk, to their surprise, who elucidates how Gaitan has been an essential link in the chain of the murder mystery and the only officer who had suspected the actual culprit, Vijay Salgaonkar. Mira goes on to shed light on how the IG has been an acquaintance to her, and ever since his appointment had placed 2 shadow police officers to carry out their cloak and dagger activities against the Salgaonkars, disguised as their neighbors Shiv and Jenny, who had succeeded in uncloaking the chink in Vijay's armor, which would ultimately lead to the reopening of the Samir Desmuk murder case. Jenny reveals how she had installed audio recording devices at the residence and then led Nandini to confide in her and reveal that Vijay had shifted the dead body on the same night to another location, one which shall remain a secret to all except for Vijay himself. The investigations gain momentum as soon as the files are reopened. The entire case undergoes a recap, and the team touches upon the fact that since Vijay had shifted the dead body on October 4th, he must have returned home by 4:30 a.m. as he was supposed to leave for Panji with his family by 5:30 a.m., allotting 2 hours for exhuming and reburying the corpse. An hour and a half would have been left for Vijay to travel to and return from the site of the burial if he had started by 1:30 a.m. that night. The estimations indicate how the dead body could only be buried somewhere within the 45 kilometers radius of Vijay's residence. As the police works to pace up the investigations, they come across Subhash Salvi, a resident at the same lane, who informs the police that he had seen Vijay Salgayakar returning back to his house in his jeep at about 4 a.m. on October 4th, when he had rushed to the local pharmacy to arrange for an inhaler for his asthmatic wife after they had returned from the Dalhousie Club, where they watched a theatrical play together on the same night. This leads the police to conclude that the route Vijay had used leads to the St. Mitchell Church Cemetery, which could have been a potential site for burying the body. However, unearthing bodies at the cemetery would be a breach to the public's religious sentiments and might stir public outrage against the police department. Therefore, as a way to find out whether or not the body rests in the cemetery, the police devises a plan. Jenny knocks hurriedly onto the door and blasts in. She provokes a panicky response in Nandini by falsely claiming that the police have started to look up for the body at the church cemetery and she must inform Vijay about it. Afraid-stricken, Nandini calls Vijay home urgently. Upon his arrival, she tells him about the revelation Jenny had made to them. However, Vijay placates her by telling her that this ordeal might last for the rest of all their lives, therefore she must not lose herself to such rumors. The serenity in Vijay's voice assures the police that the cemetery is certainly not the site. The hype created around the events of 3rd and the 4th of October intrigue David, who overhears several distorted accounts of the night while sitting at the Martin's Corner. As he leaves the cafe, he sees Vijay walking out of the Pondalam police station. Initially, he confuses the familiarity as deja vu. However, a flick second later, he recollects October 4, 2014 to be the same night he was arrested and imprisoned. He recalls having stopped momentarily to gasp for breath in the vicinity of the under-construction police station where he had seen just the same visuals of Vijay walking out at around 3 a.m. Havoc is wreaked when David decides to put forth his claim. The entire team collects at the Pondalam police station at the late hours of the night as David had voiced his condition that he would only communicate with the senior officers. Upon arrival of the IG and Meera, David voices his demand of 2.5 million rupees in exchange for the information. As the police department succumbs to his demands, he reveals that Vijay had buries the body right under the feet of the IG, 6 feet beneath the floors of the Pondalam police station. The revelation leaves everyone awestruck. The court orders allow digging up the premises of the police station. Adequate arrangements are made to carry out the operation efficiently under the span of 24 hours. After several hours of undying efforts, the remains of the skeleton are discovered. As the news breaks to Vijay, he rushes to his cinema office from where he eyes the police station through the CCTV cameras installed outside his cable operations office. The remains are boxed up and sent for forensic testing immediately. The next day, the forensic test reports indicated that the skeletal remains belonged to a male aged 15-20 years who had died due to a fracture on his head. Based on the findings, the court permits the police to be able to investigate the Salgaonkar family for 8 hours on the following day. The next morning, the Salgaonkar family sits in to begin with the interrogation, where Meera breaks in to put forth the voice recording where Nandini had confessed to knowing that Vijay had shifted the dead body on the night of the murder. The confession leaves the Salgaonkars utterly defenseless and uprooted. The interrogation intensifies and the police pressurize Vijay to confess by using torture over his family as a tactic. The physical abuse over the women of his house by Gaitan disturbs Vijay. However, it is Anju's epileptic seizure that breaks his spirit down and he succumbs to the pressure by agreeing to confess. In his confession, he states that on the night of October 2, 2014, Vijay had discovered someone trying to break into the house, who he had hit from behind on his head with the intention to hurt, not kill. The following day in the court hearing, however, Vijay claims that he was compelled to make such a completely untrue confession. In the meantime, the DNA testing reports revealed that the skeletal remains were not those of Samir Deshmukh. The defense lawyer illuminates how the police had set up a death trap to frame Vijay by simply replicating the plot of a crime thriller novel published by the name of Drishyam. These developments in the case leaves a dumbfounded courtroom which plead Vijay not guilty. While the court hearings were still underway, Meera and IG Taran were met by a guest. The guest happens to be the scriptwriter for Vijay's film who had come to the police after the murder mystery struck him. He revealed that the book was based on Vijay's idea, however, published by his own name as author, which would make it impossible to prove that the idea actually belonged to him. This leaves the last page unturned, where the scriptwriter explains how Vijay had told him about an idea he was willing to embellish the end with. The story of a man in a similar situation as that of Vijay ends where, after many years of having changed the site of the grave, still remains skeptical for the truth to unfold on a day. He, therefore, prepares himself by finding a body with the same forensic details as those of Samir's body. He simultaneously befriends the cemetery keeper, and as the time nears he exhumes the skeleton from the cemetery and exchanges the remains with those of Samir's body. This way the DNA testing shall produce a negative result. The striking brilliance and the nuance of Vijay's flawless plan wins over the peck of his enemies. As Meera and Mahesh prepare to leave India forever, Vijay drops the funeral pyres of Samir at their doorstep for them to be able to carry out the last rites. The end.